Welcome to Life Bond Tales. Like and share if you think this story touches your heart. Let's dive into the story. Michael Langston stepped out of his chauffeured black SUV into the sharp bite of Manhattan's late autumn air, his polished loafers tapping a steady rhythm against the frost-kissed sidewalk as he approached the towering glass facade of Manhattan General Hospital. At 38, he was a tech titan whose name echoed through Silicon Valley and Wall Street, his face a fixture on magazine covers, his innovations reshaping how the world connected. Yet today, his broad shoulders sagged under a weight no acquisition or IPO could shift. His navy suit, tailored to perfection in Milan, clung to him like armor, hiding a heart that thudded with an unease he couldn't shake, a nervousness that felt foreign to a man who thrived in high-stakes boardrooms. He adjusted his silver cufflinks, a gift from his late mother, their cool metal grounding him as he prepared to announce a $15 million donation to the hospital's pediatric oncology wing, a gesture rooted in the ache of her death, from leukemia when he was just 12. The memory of her sunken cheeks, her once vibrant eyes dulled by pain, haunted him still, her frail hand squeezing his as she whispered for him to live a life that mattered. That promise had fueled his relentless climb from a scrappy college coder to the CEO of Langston Tech, a global empire that powered half the world's smartphones, but it left him returning each night to a sterile Upper East Side penthouse, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a glittering city that felt impossibly distant. The hospital's marble lobby gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, the air thick with antiseptic and the faint hum of urgency, stirring memories of childhood vigils by his mother's bedside, reading her Spider-Man comics to coax a smile, her laughter a fleeting treasure he'd failed to save. Today's donation wasn't just charity. It was a desperate bid to quiet the guilt of surviving her, of building a legacy of wealth, while her voice echoed in his mind, urging him to find joy beyond success. Nurses moved past with quiet efficiency, their scrubs a blur of pastel colors, offering polite nods to the man whose name would soon adorn a new wing, but their warmth couldn't pierce the chill of his isolation. His assistant, Lauren, trailed close, her tablet glowing with bullet points for the press conference. But Michael's thoughts drifted to the boy he'd been, sneaking cookies to his mother's hospital room, believing love could outwit fate. Now, with billions in his accounts, he couldn't buy back those moments or fill the silence of his apartment, where sleek Scandinavian furniture and abstract art mocked his solitude, a life curated for envy but devoid of connection. As he crossed the lobby, a child's laughter echoed from a distant corridor, and he paused, caught by the sound. So pure, so unlike the calculated pleasantries of his world. The press room loomed ahead, reporters already gathering, their cameras poised like predators, and Michael straightened, slipping into the polished CEO persona he'd honed over years. Yet as he reached the podium, his eyes snagged on a crayon, drawing tape to the wall, a clumsy sun with a lopsided grin radiating warmth he couldn't feel. His throat tightened, and for a moment he was 12 again, promising his mother he'd make her proud, a vow that had driven him to conquer markets but left him adrift in a sea of accolades. The crowd hushed, waiting for his speech, but the words felt hollow, a script that couldn't capture the ache of a man who'd gained everything except a reason to come home. He wondered if this donation could honor his mother's hope that he'd find love, purpose, a life beyond the cold arithmetic of success, or if he was still failing her, chasing a legacy that rang empty in the face of a child's simple joy. Michael Langston lingered in the hospital's pediatric wing after the press conference, his polished exterior fraying as the weight of his speech settled into an uneasy quiet. The reporters had dispersed, their questions about his donation answered with practiced charm, but the sterile corridors of Manhattan General Hospital offered no applause, only the soft beep of monitors and the murmur of worried voices. He'd dismissed Lauren and his driver, needing solitude to process the day, his footsteps echoing on the polished linoleum as he wandered deeper into the wing he'd just funded. The air was heavy with the scent of disinfectant, mingled with the faint sweetness of flowers left by anxious families, and it stirred a restless ache he couldn't name. He paused by a window overlooking a courtyard where children in hospital gowns played under watchful nurses, their laughter a stark contrast to the knot in his chest. Then he saw them, 3 identical 5-year-old girls standing near a nurse's station, their presence like a jolt of electricity. Lily, in a vibrant green dress, stood with arms crossed, her stance commanding. Ava, in purple, studied a hospital pamphlet with intense focus. Zoe, in a soft pink sundress, clutched a stuffed bunny, her eyes darting with shy curiosity. Their dark curls and wide, searching eyes stopped Michael cold, not just for their striking triplet resemblance, but for a haunting familiarity that tugged at a buried memory. His breath caught as he noticed Lily's defiant tilt of her chin, a gesture so like one he'd seen years ago in a cramped Brooklyn apartment filled with paint cans and dreams. A nurse, her badge reading Clara, passed by, and Michael found himself speaking before he could stop. "Those girls, are they patients?" Clara's face softened. "The Thompson triplets?" "No, they're visiting their mum, Elizabeth Thompson, in room 412. She's been fighting sickle cell anemia for weeks. Sweet kids here every day, coloring or reading to her." The name Elizabeth Thompson hit Michael like a rogue wave, his knees weakening as he steadied himself against the wall. Elizabeth, his college love, whose laughter once lit up his world, whose stubborn passion for teaching matched his own drive for tech. 6 years ago, he'd walked away from her, choosing a startup deal in Silicon Valley over their shared dreams, her tearful pleas unable to compete with his ambition. The math raced through his mind. 5 years old, triplets, born roughly 9 months after their bitter breakup. His palms grew clammy as he watched the girls huddled together, Zoe whispering something that made Ava nod solemnly, Lily scanning the hallway like a tiny sentinel. Could they be his? The thought was absurd, impossible, yet the details screamed otherwise. Ava's analytical squint, Zoe's gentle fidgeting, Lily's protective stance, all echoing traits he knew too well. He forced a smile at Clara, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "They seem special." Clara nodded, unaware of his turmoil. "They're a handful, but so bright. Elizabeth's a single mum, and those girls are her world. Single mum." The words twisted in Michael's gut, a mix of guilt and dread. He thanked Clara and turned away, his heart pounding as he pulled out his phone, dialing his private investigator, Tom, with a voice that barely hid his urgency. "Tom, I need a discreet background check on Elizabeth Thompson. Mid-30s, New York area, mother of 5-year-old triplets. Get me everything, birth records, medical history, timeline." As he hung up, he watched the girls again, Lily now leading her sisters to a bench where they shared a picture book, their unity a quiet strength that both awed and terrified him. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting their small shadows across the floor, and Michael felt a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. Elizabeth had never told him, had carried this alone while he chased success across continents. The investigator's call came faster than expected, just hours later, as Michael sat in his penthouse, the city's skyline mocking him through the glass. Tom's voice was clinical. "Elizabeth Thompson, 35, hospitalized 3 weeks for sickle cell complications. Triplets, Lily, Ava, Zoe, born 5 years, 3 months ago, September 2020. No father listed on the birth certificates." The timeline confirmed his worst fear, aligning perfectly with their final night together. A desperate argument fueled by love and betrayal. Michael's hands shook as he set the phone down, the sterile luxury of his apartment suffocating him. He stood, pacing, his mind replaying Elizabeth's face, her fierce brown eyes, her laugh that could unravel his defenses. Had she known she was pregnant when he left? Why hadn't she reached out? The questions burned, but the girls' faces, those tiny mirrors of his past, demanded answers he wasn't ready to face. He grabbed his coat, the need to return to the hospital overwhelming, not for clarity but for a glimpse of something he'd lost, something he hadn't known he needed until now. Michael Langston sat in his sleek office the next morning, the city's skyline a grey blur through the window, his mind far from the spreadsheets and emails demanding his attention. The investigator's report lay on his desk, a stark confirmation that Lily, Ava, and Zoe were almost certainly his daughters, a truth that had kept him awake all night, replaying the moment he'd walked away from Elizabeth Thompson 6 years. "Hago." Her voice, sharp with hurt, had begged him to stay, But he'd chosen a tech empire over their love, leaving her in a cramped Brooklyn apartment filled with her lesson plans and dreams of teaching inner-city kids. Now, knowing she'd faced pregnancy and single motherhood alone, guilt gnawed at him like a relentless tide. He needed to know more, to understand the life she'd built without him. And that meant facing her brother, David Thompson, a high school teacher whose number Tom had dug up. Michael drove to Brooklyn's PS 321, where David taught, his palms sweaty on the steering wheel, the hospital's antiseptic scent still clinging to his memory. The school's brick facade loomed, buzzing with after-hours activity, and Michael waited outside David's classroom, his tailored coat out of place among the scuffed linoleum and student artwork. When David emerged, a wiry man in his early 40s with Elizabeth's sharp eyes, his face hardened at the sight of Michael. "You've got some nerve showing up here, Langston," David said, his voice low but cutting, arms crossed like a shield. Michael swallowed, his CEO confidence useless against this raw hostility. "I didn't know about the girls, David, I swear it." David's laugh was bitter, echoing in the empty hallway. "Didn't know because you didn't want to know. Elizabeth called you twice when she found out she was pregnant. Your assistant brushed her off, said you were too busy building your empire." The accusation landed like a punch, and Michael's mind flashed to those frantic early days in Silicon Valley. His phone silenced, his focus laser-sharp on deals. He'd told his team to filter personal calls, never imagining what he was shutting out. "I never got those messages," he said, his voice cracking. But David's glare didn't soften. "She was alone, Michael, pregnant with triplets, teaching full-time while you were on magazine covers. She wrote you emails, poured her heart out, but never sent them because she knew you'd chosen your path." David's words stung, and Michael's chest tightened as he asked to see those emails, needing to understand the depth of what he'd missed. David hesitated, then pulled a USB drive from his bag, his expression a mix of anger and exhaustion. "These aren't for you to feel better. They're for you to know what she went through." Back in his penthouse, Michael plugged the drive into his laptop, his hands trembling as Elizabeth's words filled the screen. The first email, dated 6 months after their breakup, read, "I felt them move today, Michael. 3 little lives all at once. I keep wondering if you'd care, if you'd come back if you knew." Another, when the girls were a year old. "Lily's already so fierce, Ava's obsessed with puzzles. Zoe cries when she sees hurt animals. They're beautiful and I'm terrified I'm not enough." The final email, from 2 years ago, broke him. "Saw you in Time magazine, smiling. Like you've got it all. I'm glad you're happy, Michael. We're okay without you, but I wish you could see them just once." Tears blurred his vision, each word a reminder of the life he'd abandoned, the love he'd traded for ambition. Elizabeth's strength shone through every line, her resilience in raising 3 girls alone while battling sickle cell anemia, a condition he vaguely remembered her managing in college. He closed the laptop, the silence of his apartment deafening, and made a decision. He couldn't undo the past, but he could step into their present. He called David, his voice steady despite the ache in his throat. "I want to meet them, David. Not as their father, not yet, but as someone who cares about Elizabeth, please." David's silence stretched, heavy with years of resentment, but finally he agreed, his tone grudging. "One meeting supervised at the hospital. Elizabeth's too sick to decide this now, and I won't let you hurt them. You show up as a family friend, nothing more." Michael nodded, though David couldn't see, relief and fear warring inside him. The next afternoon he returned to Manhattan General, his heart pounding as he approached the Pediatric Wing's family lounge, a cozy space with colorful walls and scattered toys. David stood by the door, arms crossed, watching Michael like a hawk. The girls were there, Lily sketching in a notebook, Ava stacking blocks with mathematical precision, Zoe humming softly to her bunny. Michael's breath caught at their closeness, their unspoken bond evident in the way they moved together, a trio of strength and vulnerability. David introduced him stiffly. "Girls, this is Mr. Langston, an old friend of your mum's from college." Lily looked up, her gaze sharp and assessing. Ava tilted her head curiously, and Zoe offered a shy smile that pierced Michael's heart. He knelt to their level, his voice soft. "It's nice to meet you. Your mum used to tell me about 3 very special girls. Lily's eyes narrowed. She never mentioned you. The bluntness stung, but Michael smiled. Sometimes old. Friends lose touch, but I'm here now because I heard how brave you've been for your mom. Ava studied him, her small fingers pausing on a block. Are you here to help her get better? The question, so direct, caught him off guard, and he glanced at David, who gave a curt nod. I'm here to help however I can, Michael said, meaning every word. Zoe clutched her bunny tighter. Mommy's tired all the time. Do you know stories about when she wasn't tired? Michael's throat tightened, memories of Elizabeth's college days flooding back. Her dancing in the rain, her fierce debates in class, her quiet moments grading papers by candlelight when their power was cut. I do, he said. She was the bravest person I knew, always helping others, always smiling. The girls listened, rapt, as he shared a safe, simple story of Elizabeth organizing a book drive for kids, their eyes lighting up at this glimpse of their mother's past. As he spoke, Michael felt a shift, a fragile thread of connection forming, but David's watchful presence reminded him of the boundaries. This wasn't his family, not yet, but the pull of those 3 small faces was stronger than any deal he'd ever chased. As he left the hospital, the girls' laughter echoing in his mind, Michael knew he couldn't walk away again, not from them, not from the chance to make things right. Michael Langston's days began to orbit around the hospital's family lounge, where the hum of Manhattan General's pediatric wing became as familiar as the buzz of his corporate office. Each afternoon, after board meetings and investor calls, he traded his tailored suits for a softer demeanor, arriving with small, thoughtful gifts for Lily, Ava, and Zoe, careful not to overwhelm them with the extravagance his wealth could afford. For Lily, he brought a leather-bound journal with a green embossed cover, perfect for her budding stories. For Ava, a pocket-sized science kit with magnets and a tiny telescope. For Zoe, a plush owl with button eyes that matched her love for animals. He was learning their worlds. Lily's fierce imagination, Ava's relentless curiosity, Zoe's tender heart, and each visit chipped away at the walls he'd built around himself. David, Elizabeth's brother, remained a stern guardian, watching every interaction with a teacher's scrutiny, ensuring Michael stayed within the bounds of family friend. Yet the girls, with their unfiltered questions, drew him in deeper. One rainy afternoon, as they sat cross-legged on the lounge's worn carpet, Lily fixed him with a stare. "Mr. Langston, why do you keep coming back? Most grown-ups visit once and then forget." Her words, sharp with a 5-year-old's clarity, caught him off guard, and he glanced at David, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Michael knelt to meet her gaze, his voice gentle. "I come because I see how much you love your mum, and it reminds me of someone I cared about a long time ago. I want to help you be happy while she's getting better." Ava, sorting her magnets into precise rows, looked up. "Helping means understanding. Do you know why Mommy's sick?" Michael hesitated, choosing his words carefully, aware of David's watchful eyes. "Your mom has a condition that makes her body fight itself sometimes, but the doctors here are working hard to help her feel strong again." Zoe, clutching her owl, whispered, "She used to sing to us every night. Now she's too tired. Will you tell us a story about her singing?" Michael's chest ached, memories of Elizabeth's voice flooding back, her impromptu concerts in their college apartment, belting folk songs while cooking pasta. He shared a tale of her singing at a campus open mic, her voice so warm it hushed. A rowdy crowd, and the girls leaned in, their eyes wide, as if glimpsing their mother's spirit before illness dimmed it. These moments became his anchor, more vital than any boardroom win, but they also sharpened his longing to claim his role as their father, a truth he couldn't yet voice. One evening, as rain lashed the hospital windows, the girls invited him to a makeshift picnic in the lounge, spreading a blanket with paper plates and juice boxes. Lily directed the setup with bossy precision. Ava calculated the best spot for light, and Zoe insisted on sharing her cookies with Michael. As they sat, Zoe's small hand tugged his sleeve. "Mr. Langston, will you still come when Mommy's better, or will you go away like other people do?" The question pierced him, her wide eyes searching for a promise he desperately wanted to keep. He glanced at David, who gave a reluctant nod, and Michael's voice softened. "Zoe, I'll be here as long as you want me to be. Getting better doesn't mean goodbye. Lily, ever skeptical, tilted her head. I say that, but grown-ups make promises they don't always keep. Her words stung, echoing his own failures, but he met her gaze. I'm trying to be someone who keeps his promises, Lily. I hope you'll give me a chance to show it. Ava, practical as always, added, We'll know if you mean it by what you do, not what you say. Her logic, so like his own analytical mind, made him smile, but it also solidified his resolve. He began adjusting his life, delegating late-night calls to his VP to ensure he never missed a visit, his once rigid schedule bending to accommodate story times and coloring sessions. One afternoon, he noticed Lily's journal filled with tales of a brave princess who protected her sisters. Ava's telescope pointed at a ceiling light as she explained constellations, and Zoe's owl tucked beside her as she hummed a tune Elizabeth once loved. He was learning their language, their fears, their joys, and it awakened a part of him he'd buried under ambition. During a quiet moment, as the girls napped on the lounge couch, David pulled Michael aside, his voice low. You're doing better than I expected, but don't think this makes up for leaving Elizabeth. The girls are starting to trust you, and if you break that, I'll make sure you regret it. Michael nodded, the weight of David's warning grounding him. I know I can't erase the past, but I'm here for them, David. I'm not going anywhere. David studied him, then sighed. They need someone steady. Elizabeth's fighting, but it's a long road. Just don't make promises you can't keep. That night, alone in his penthouse, Michael pulled up photos from his college days. Elizabeth's smile radiant in every frame, and realized how much of himself he saw in the girls, Lily's determination, Ava's precision, Zoe's empathy. He wasn't just a visitor in their lives, he was becoming part of their story, and it terrified and thrilled him. The next day he arrived early, bringing a storybook about 3 sisters who faced dragons together, and read it with such warmth that Zoe curled against him. Ava asked about dragon physics, and Lily sketched the scene. As he left, Lily handed him a drawing, a man with dark hair holding hands with 3 girls under a rainbow. That's you, she said matter-of-factly, and Michael's throat tightened, the paper feeling heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. He was no longer just Michael Langston, tech mogul. He was someone these girls were beginning to need, and that shift made his world feel both bigger and scarier than any corporate empire. The hospital's family lounge, once a temporary refuge for Michael Langston, had become a second home, its colorful walls and scattered toys a backdrop to his growing bond with Lily, Ava, and Zoe. But on a grey November morning, as he prepared for another visit, his phone buzzed with a frantic message from David. Elizabeth's sickle cell anemia had triggered a sudden crisis, her body overwhelmed by a cascade of complications requiring emergency treatment. Michael's heart plummeted, the sterile glow of his office fading as he abandoned a critical board meeting, ignoring his CFO's protests about a looming acquisition deal with a Singapore tech giant. He sped to Manhattan General, the city's honking traffic a blur, his mind racing with fear for Elizabeth and the girls. Arriving at the ICU waiting area, he found David pacing, his face etched with exhaustion, and the triplets huddled on a bench, their usual vibrancy dulled by terror. Lily clutched her journal, her knuckles white. Ava stared blankly at her science kit, unmoving. Zoe's owl was pressed tight against her chest, her eyes red from silent tears. David's voice was hoarse as he explained, Her organs are struggling. The doctors are trying a new treatment, but it's touch and go. Michael knelt before the girls, his suit creased, his voice steady, despite the panic clawing at him. Your mom's fighting hard and the doctors are helping her. We're going to wait together, okay? Ava's voice trembled, her usual logic faltering. What if the treatment doesn't work? What if she doesn't wake up? The raw fear in her question mirrored Michael's own, but he took her small hand. We don't know what'll happen, Ava, but we'll face it together. You don't have to be brave alone. Zoe buried her face in his shoulder, her sobs muffled, and Lily, ever the protector, whispered, I'm scared, but I can't let them see. Michael's heart broke at her attempt to carry the weight of her sister's pain. You don't have to hold it all, Lily. I'm here to help carry it. Desperate to ease their fear, he suggested a break from the sterile waiting room. Let's go to the hospital garden. A little fresh air might help. David nodded reluctantly, and Michael led the girls to the courtyard, where bare trees swayed in the chilly wind. He improvised a game, challenging them to find the brightest leaf, and for a moment their laughter broke through the gloom. Zoe giggling as she chased a red leaf, Ava analyzing its shape, Lily organizing a leaf pile with military precision. Back inside, as they sipped hot cocoa from the cafeteria, Michael noticed their individual ways of coping. Lily wrote furiously in her journal, Ava asked endless questions about blood cells, Zoe hummed to her owl, seeking comfort in rhythm. He realized he was learning to navigate their fears, not as a CEO with solutions, but as a father with presence. That evening, his phone lit up with urgent messages. The Singapore deal was collapsing without his presence, a $300 million loss looming. His team begged him to fly out, but Michael silenced the notifications, his decision instant. Reschedule everything, he told his assistant, his voice firm. I'm not leaving. The board's shock echoed through his earpiece, but he didn't care. The girl's trembling hands mattered more than any stock price. Over the next 2 days, he became their anchor, answering Ava's medical questions with help from a nurse, holding Zoe during her quiet cries, and praising Lily's stories as she poured her worries onto paper. He researched child psychology at night, learning how trauma shaped young minds, tailoring his approach to each girl's needs, structure for Lily, facts for Ava, warmth for Zoe. On the third day, as they sat in the lounge, Zoe drew a picture of their family, including Michael for the first time, his stick figure hand holding hers. You make it less scary, she said softly, and Michael's eyes stung, the weight of her trust heavier than any corporate victory. When David announced Elizabeth had stabilized, the girls' relief was palpable, their hugs fierce as they clung to Michael. He organized a small celebration in the lounge, bringing cupcakes and a playlist of Elizabeth's favorite folk songs, the girls singing off-key but with joy. Lily, usually guarded, smiled at him. You stayed, Mr. Langston. You didn't go away. Ava nodded, her telescope now aimed at a paper star she'd made. You kept your promise. Zoe, her owl tucked under her arm, added, You're like a daddy. The word hit Michael like a tidal wave, and he glanced at David, who gave a grudging nod of approval. Later, as the girls napped, Michael sat with David, who admitted, I didn't think you'd stick around. They're starting to need you. Michael's voice was quiet but resolute. I need them too. I've spent years building things that don't last. This matters. The next day, during a visit to Elizabeth's room, the girls called him Dad for the first time, the word slipping out naturally. As Ava asked, Dad, can you read Mommy's favorite story? Michael froze, his heart swelling, and he read from a worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, his voice thick with emotion as the girls leaned against him, their trust a fragile gift. He knew this moment was a turning point, not just for them, but for him. A man who'd once measured success in dollars, now measuring it in the weight of a child's hand in his. As he left the hospital, Lily's drawing tucked in his pocket, Michael felt a shift. He wasn't just playing a role. He was becoming their father, and no deal, no empire, could compare to the purpose he'd found in their eyes. Michael Langston stood in the foyer of a Brooklyn brownstone, its hardwood floors creaking under his weight, a far cry from the sterile polish of his Manhattan penthouse. The house, purchased after weeks of searching with David and the girls, was a warm, century-old space with high ceilings, stained glass windows, and a backyard oak that seemed to whisper promises of family adventures. Elizabeth's slow recovery from her sickle cell crisis demanded stability, and this home, chosen for its garden for Zoe, bookshelves for Ava, and a sunlit corner for Lily's writing, was Michael's commitment to giving the triplets a sanctuary. He'd traded his corporate driver for a practical SUV, its back seat now littered with juice boxes and crayons, a testament to his new rhythm of school pickups and hospital visits. Elizabeth, now strong enough to leave the hospital for short periods, sat in the living room wrapped in a quilt, her face pale but her eyes brighter than they'd been in months. The girls buzzed around her, Lily reading a story she'd written about a magical tree, Ava explaining the physics of a paper airplane she'd launched, Zoe weaving daisies, Elizabeth's favorite, into a crown for her mother. Michael watched from the doorway, his heart full yet heavy, knowing the delicate balance of co-parenting with Elizabeth lay ahead. They'd agreed to focus on the girls, setting aside their fractured past, but her presence stirred memories of their college love, nights debating philosophy, her laughter filling their tiny apartment. Today was Elizabeth's 36th birthday, a milestone the girls had planned with fierce determination, their first celebration with her outside the VIA hospital's confines. Michael had coordinated with David to keep it simple, mindful of her fragile health, transforming the brownstones' dining room with streamers and a small cake, the girls' artwork covering the walls like a gallery of love. As they sang "Happy," birthday off-key but heartfelt, Elizabeth's smile lit the room and Michael saw the woman he'd once known, her strength unbroken despite her illness. Lily presented a handmade book of poems. Ava offered a star chart she'd drawn for their new backyard, and Zoe sang a lullaby she'd practiced for weeks, her voice trembling with joy. Elizabeth's eyes shimmered as she hugged each girl, her gaze lingering on Michael, with a mix of gratitude and unspoken questions. Later, as the girls played in the garden, Elizabeth pulled him aside, her voice soft but firm. "You've given them more than a house, Michael. You've given them hope. But we need to talk about what this means for us." He nodded, his throat tight, knowing this conversation would shape their future. "I'm not here to push anything, Elizabeth. I want to be their dad, to give them what I missed out on giving you, support, presence. We'll figure out the rest as we go." She studied him, her eyes searching for the man who'd left her 6 years ago, and found instead someone shaped by regret and love. "They call you Dad now," she said, a faint smile breaking through. "They chose that, not you. That's what matters." The moment was interrupted by Zoe's squeal from the garden, where she'd found a ladybug, and Michael and Elizabeth joined the girls, laughing as Ava calculated the bug's wingspan and Lily spun a story about its adventures. That evening, the family gathered for a ritual that had become sacred. Story time in the living room, where Michael read from a book of folk tales. The girls sprawled across him and Elizabeth, their warmth a contrast to the autumn chill outside. Lily, usually so guarded, asked, "Dad, are we a real family now, even if you and Mom aren't married?" The question hung in the air, and Michael glanced at Elizabeth, who gave a small nod. "Families aren't about being perfect, Lily," he said. "They're about choosing to be there every day, no matter what. We're as real as it gets." Ava, ever practical, added, "Most families start with parents, then kids. We did it backward, but it works." Zoe, nestled against Elizabeth, yawned. "I like our family. It's messy, but good." Elizabeth's laugh, soft but genuine, filled the room, and Michael felt a peace he'd never known in boardrooms or penthouses. The next week, he organized a small art show in the brownstones' backyard, a celebration of Elizabeth's recovery and the girls' creativity. Neighbors and David's friends filled the space, admiring Lily's stories, Ava's star charts, and Zoe's daisy chains, all displayed under fairy lights. Michael hung Elizabeth's old college sketches alongside the girls' work, a quiet nod to her past as an artist, and when she saw them, her eyes welled up. "You remembered," she whispered, and he nodded, unable to speak. The girls ran to him, showing off their creations, and for the first time, Michael felt like he belonged, not as a guest, but as part of their world. As the evening wound down, he and Elizabeth sat on the porch, watching the girls chase fireflies. "I never thought we'd get here," she said, her voice carrying years of pain and healing. "Me neither," Michael admitted. "I spent years building things that didn't matter. This is my legacy." They didn't speak of love or reconciliation, but the shared silence held possibility, a promise to build something new for their daughters. The brownstone, filled with laughter, messy art projects, and the girls' endless questions, was no longer just a house, it was a home, imperfect and alive. Michael realized his empire, still thriving, no longer defined him. He was defined by Lily's fierce hugs, Ava's relentless whys, Zoe's quiet trust, and Elizabeth's cautious hope. As he tucked the girls into their new bedrooms, Lily's with a writing desk, Ava's with a telescope, Zoe's overlooking the garden, he knew he'd finally found what his mother had wanted for him. A life that mattered, not for its wealth, but for its love.